To many people, the Mexican Revolution is nothing but a revolution. To many others, it's something to do with Mexico. But to me, it's a humanities project. So here's my research question. Before Mexico was what it is today, it had suffered through decades of instability and war. Once Mexico gained independence from Spain, the Mexican-American War started, and Mexico lost half its land. Then came along the French. When that was over, Mexico suffered from their own revolution. So what exactly caused this revolution, and what were its consequences? Before you can know any of that, you need to know its basics of what happened and who were its key players. So this guy's the reason the whole thing started in the first place. His name is Porfirio Diaz. Just look at his smug face. He was the president of Mexico for 30 years. However, he's better known for being Mexico's notorious dictator. Apart from being a dictator, under the reign of Diaz, Mexico prospered in economics. With him, Mexico got modern technologies such as electricity and railways and factories. As I mentioned before, Porfirio Diaz was a dictator. He did this by terminating a no re-election policy, establishing himself as the dictator. Diaz influenced voters through the use of terror. He even implemented his own armed police force called the Guardia Rural, which frightened citizens, and its presence was often enough to sway votes. Then came along this guy. His name is Francisco Madero. Madero was a leader in the Mexican Revolution. He was well educated and studied in Paris and the US. When he returned to Mexico, he understood the need for political reform. Madero attempted to run against Diaz for president, which ended up with him behind bars. While behind bars, Madero gained support of Amerindian peasants by promising liberal reforms. With them, Madero formed an army to fight Diaz. Beside Madero fought Pancho Villa and Emiliano Zapata. All three of them were leaders who shared a common goal of removing Diaz from power. Soon after, Francisco Madero called for a re-election, which he won. He was supported by the United States, Pancho Villa, and Emiliano Zapata. But after a very short time in office, he lost his support from Zapata. This is because of Madero's liberal reforms. Zapata then drafted a document called the Plan de Ayala, which noted Madero's reluctance to return land to the owners in Mexico. Madero was then forced to leave the office. Madero was then replaced by Victoriano Huerta, his former commander-in-chief. A week later, Madero and his former vice president were killed. Huerta had difficulty obtaining support from the Mexican people and was never recognized as president of Mexico by the United States. Many people were dissatisfied by what Huerta was doing, but one who decided to take action was Venustiano Carranza. He was supported by Pancho Villa, a newcomer Alvaro Obregón, Emiliano Zapata, and secretly by the United States. During this time, Pancho Villa and Venustiano Carranza became enemies, but they both decided to stay together and eliminate power from Huerta. Carranza then declared the Plan de Guadalupe, which rejected acceptance of Huerta as president. America then aided by impeding German goods arriving in Veracruz, a Mexican port. Huerta then panicked and fled the office. Once Huerta had left, Venustiano Carranza seized power, which was much to the surprise of Villa and Zapata. They, in turn, sieged Mexico City. The armies were cruel to the citizens of the city. After nearly 3 years of bloody skirmishes and the assassination of Pancho Villa, Carranza was elected president despite the opposition from other revolutionaries. Carranza had appointed Alvaro Obregón as his commander-in-chief. Due to the fact that Carranza never implemented any of his reforms, Obregón assassinated him. Alvaro Obregón then ascended into power in 1920 after killing his predecessor. And this was the end of the Mexican Revolution. However, revolts continued and peace was not achieved until 1934 when Lázaro Cárdenas del Río served as president. Now that you know the basics of the Mexican Revolution, let's get into why it happened and what were its consequences. As you know, the main cause of the revolution was the dictatorship of Porfirio Diaz. However, his dictatorship wasn't the only thing that sparked this revolution. It was also the fact that he never did anything for the people of this country apart from grow its country's economy, which only benefited the higher people of Mexico. The issues that brought revolution were already in place years before the revolution, but when efforts were finally being made to resolve these issues, the result was years of strife in Mexico. These issues involved the land ownership, the role of the Catholic Church, foreign influences in Mexico's affairs, and the status of the country's many poor indigenous people. In terms of consequences from this revolution, there weren't many, but however, there were many benefits to this revolution. In the aftermath of the Mexican Revolution, but before the assassination of Venustiano Carranza wanted to give more power to the President of Mexico. This ended up in him creating a new constitution. This constitution changed every aspect of life in Mexico. The Mexican people had created a document that took their years of revolution and met their demands for the law of their land. No one living in Mexico would ever be the same again. If you were a wealthy landowner before the days of this constitution, you were seen to have owned the workers on your land. You could have paid your workers any wages, and your decisions on how to treat your workers were dependent on what brought you the best economic benefit. However, if you woke up on the day of February 5th, 1917, all those assumptions about your power would not be true. The government was going to restore land that had been taken from the peasantry and given them the power to choose their own destinies. In my opinion, the Mexican Revolution was a necessary step for Mexico to become what it is today. However, the Mexican Revolution could have been cut a lot shorter if it wasn't for the revolutionaries' selfish acts to gain power.